Hello everyone, I am Nikita Sanger, Young India Fellow from the 10th cohort and quite excited to be sharing this space with you all. Thank you for choosing to spend your time here. Today we will discuss the pathways of possibilities in public policy space post Young India Fellowship with some of our alumni who have charted out this path for themselves. Young India Fellowship, as you all might be aware, is a one-year postgraduate diploma in liberal studies and leadership. Ever since its inception a decade ago, the fellowship has helped young individuals switch careers meaningfully, explore diverse areas of study and practice, grow further as an individual, start organizations, and create sustainable impact while solving problems which are at the core of our society, and also while belonging to a global community of fellows. Personally, I'm excited every day at the plethora of career ambitions I come across in my conversation with fellow fellows. In the beginning of my year at fellowship, I was a part of Professor Shiv Kumar's lecture who introduced us to India's growth story and the kind of challenges that need policy intervention. It was one of our favorite part of his lectures for me and a lot of my batchmates. So I'm as excited as you all to see how some of our alumni are working to solve these problems on a ground level at policy level. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to our moderator for this discussion, Pratyush Rawal. Pratyush is a founding member of India Leaders for Social Sector, a non-profit learning and leadership development organization that aims to build and strengthen leadership talent in India's impact space. At ILSS, Pratyush has handled multiple responsibilities, including strategy, research, operations, and outreach. Before joining the Young India Fellowship in 2016, he was associated with the Chairman's Office in Quality Council of India. He holds a Master's of Science in Finance from BITS Pilani and has a deferred admit from the Harvard Kennedy School's Masters in Public Administration program for the year 2022 to 24. Over to you, Pratyush, now.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. Public policy has been such an intriguing field for many of us. I remember growing up, I was always interested in civics and how the government works and how the laws are implemented. I'm sure many of you who are looking to apply to the Young India Fellowship are also curious about this field and want to know more, not just about public policy, but also about the various roles in this domain and how YIF can be a stepping stone in your journeys. And what better way to discuss these questions with three phenomenal Young India Fellows who have very diligently chosen to be in the policy space and build their careers, dare I say, in this non-mainstream domain. Let me introduce you to our panelists. Jasmine is from the Young India Fellowship batch of 2013 and is a project manager at Quality Council of India, where she leads high priority initiatives with the central government in the energy and infrastructure sector. Prior to QCI, she was a consultant with Expenditure Management Commission under the Ministry of Finance and as a legislative aide to Member of Parliament, Mr. Vijayant Panda. A very warm welcome to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Pratyush.
Tanuj is from the 2014 batch and he's a fellow at iSpirit Foundation. He works on architecting and implementing foundational digital infrastructure for India. Currently, he is working on LocOS, a collection of open technologies that brings women self-help groups into the formal financial system. He's also co-authoring a book with Nandan Nilekani called The Art of Bitfulness, which should be out by mid-2021. It's a pleasure to have you here, Tanuj.
Thank you.
Anna. Anna is from the Young India Fellowship batch from the 2014, Young India Fellowship batch of 2014, the same batch as Tanuj. She's a policy manager at JPAL South Asia at IFMR, where she leads the gender sector and supports work in the health sector. She works with governments, foundations, and NGOs to apply scientific evidence to policies and programs to improve gender and health outcomes. A very warm welcome to you too, Anna.
Thanks so much, Pratyush.
Thank you. So the way we will schedule today's conversation is as follows. We'll have 40 to 45 minutes of panel discussion, followed by 15 to 20 minutes of audience questions. Please feel free to write your questions for the panelists. Do not forget to mention the name of the panelist to whom your question is directed. So let us dive straight into the discussion. And I would want to begin with understanding the term public policy. There are so many avenues to work in this domain, so many ways to create impact, that it becomes very difficult to have a coherent definition of what public policy is. So my first question to all three of you is, what comes to your mind when you think of the term public policy? What do you think is the role of a policy professional? Jasmine, would you want to go first?
Sure. So when I think of public policy, I know there's like obviously that theoretical definition of the word, but how I see it is that at the end of the day, there is a development problem per se, and different stakeholders, which includes government, civil society, and people, who come together to shape sort of like a solution to solve that problem. Now, that solution has multiple elements, which is the first is sort of the conceptualization of the solution, designing the pathway of how it would be proceeded on, and then eventually it is the execution. So, for me, when I think of public policy, it is sort of like that plan of action as to how we're gonna go ahead and solve um, a particular development issue. Obviously, government is at the helm of it, but I feel like the entire discourse is obviously sort of aided and supported by other stakeholders.
Right. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Tanuj, what are your thoughts on public policy, the term public policy?
Yeah, so Jason covered, the broad strokes that we're trying. All of us collectively, we live in a civilization, we live in a society. You wanted to deliver certain things for all of us. How do you get that delivery to work? That's one way of answering that question. The second thing that I look at is, you know, for the large part, we don't know how things happen, how large things happen, right? Let's say you have a pandemic and suddenly you say, we need to solve it. What does that mean? Somebody has to develop a vaccine, but the vaccine being developed took 2 days. It's 1.5 years after that, and we're still not able to deliver that vaccine to everybody. Because for that part to work, you need so many pieces. You need to have a philosophy of how you're going to do. Let's say you say, give the vaccine to everybody. Who's everybody? Where's that list? Who owns it? So it's all these little nitty-gritties of society of getting things to work, even when we have all the missing pieces. That to me is the more interesting part of the policy problem, which is famous science fiction author said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed, right? So I see the part of the work that at least we do in public policy is distributing the future evenly.
Yeah, thank you, Tanuj. So what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's a plan and there's a lot of action involved in public policy. Anna, what are your thoughts on the term public policy?
I think my co-panelists have very succinctly sort of articulated what it is. But the only thing I would add is that there's, I think, an element of not just sort of measuring what you're doing and making sure that what you're doing is happening well, which is sort of the kind of work that I'm involved in, but also sort of making sure that the solutions that you're framing, or the kinds of options you're considering, are rooted in some kind of evidence. Now, whether this evidence comes from a specific type of evaluation, whether it comes from just years of knowing things work a certain way, or whether it's something that we haven't yet discovered, I think that's those are the elements that continue to make it important to make sure that the policies or the programs that we're designing and working on work for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So it's interesting that I caught onto the word action, I caught onto the word philosophy, and I caught onto the word uh, impact measurement. And I guess these three are very strong pillars of public policy. Now, I mean, I would want to delve a little deep into your own personal journeys and how did you end up into, as I said, in this non-mainstream domain. And I would want to begin with you first. You did your bachelor's in journalism, and how are you right now in JPAL? What's the journey like, and what were your motivations?
Yeah, good question, Pratyush. I think that the answer is work in progress, but I think I always had an interest in development issues, and my interest in joining journalism, of course, came from somewhat a fascination with the field in terms of its ability to kind of bring issues, development issues to the fore. On one end of the spectrum, but it also came from a limited understanding of what development meant. So while I started off with journalism, I think what ended up happening was at the end of the 3 years, I worked with a not-for-profit for a year after that. And I realized that development was what I wanted to do, but it was still that very buzzword, catchword that I was still operating on. And then I came across the Young India Fellowship from a peer that I knew at that point of time. And when I saw the course and the outline, I said, I don't think anything else in India exists in this shape and form that is so fluid yet so deep. So I think that's when I joined the YIF is when I started to be able to distinguish what I meant by development, what kind of work I wanted to do. I realized that gender was a big passion for me, but again, it was a loose abstract concept. And when I started to think about the problem through the various courses of YIF, I realized that what I wanted to work on was improving outcomes for women to make sure that they are able to access health services, to be able to access financial services, to be able to live lives freely, safely, things that I took for granted as an individual. So some of that came from personal motivation, but also a lot of it from the kinds of perspectives I was introduced to at YIF. And I worked post the Young India Fellowship with a multilateral organization. I worked with a research-centered organization. I went to grad school, and then I came back to join Poverty Action Lab to really sort of bring these different learnings across the last decade together. So I think that's been broadly my journey to development.
It's very motivating. Thank you so much. Tanuj, you're a chemical engineer from IIT Bombay, and your LinkedIn profile says you're helping build a digital India. So tell us a little bit about your journey from there to here, and
Sure.
how IIT played a role in this journey.
Sure. So, I mean, IIT Bombay, I started in a consulting job, but I quit it very quickly because I realized that most consulting is a waste of everybody's time. And then post that, I was doing a startup. I was in the tech space, initially at tech, etc. I joined the fellowship soon after. I was really not sure what I want to do, where I want to do it. And again, in the fellowship, I met a few wonderful people with whom I started a company that built and flew drones for a living.
Yes.
Um, and now we ran into a problem that drones were new in 2013 and 14. They were brand new. Everybody was very excited. Amazon was announcing plans to deliver with drones. And the Indian government responded by banning all drones, just completely, banning everything. And this is not new. This is how they've responded to cryptocurrency. This is how they respond to most new technologies. But what we forget is that these new technologies have been the reason we've managed to, or if not us, then some other country has managed to capture growth, right? So Bangladesh has caught on to textiles and the sort of new sort of textile manufacturing. India
Mhm.
itself, if the IT services sector is more than $160 billion in this country, has led to a lot of middle tier jobs, has led to Bangalore as a city to grow up. And we forget that, in our hurry to actively sort of, the nanny state that India is, you end up killing technology, killing these ecosystems, killing opportunities for growth and wealth development. So so I tried first myself to go to the government offices and got knocked about, got shown a lot of doors. And I realized I don't know what I'm doing here. But the problem was very interesting to me. How do you incorporate this new technology into regulations, into lawmaking, such that it actually benefits everybody? That's how I got into iSpirit, and iSpirit deals with not just drones, but a lot larger, sort of broader questions of technology in society. And yeah, since then I've been very interested because the popular narrative of technology and society is that say James Watt invented the steam engine and you had the industrial revolution. But for the first 20 years after the man invented the steam engine, nothing happened. It was when his patent expired that actually innovation took place, because others could take it in and build on it. So the first 20 years of the steam engine being invented, People don't understand this. Nothing happened. There was no locomotives. There's nothing. The Industrial Revolution hadn't even started because the policy allowing intellectual property rights over such an important innovation, societal innovation, is what killed that thing. I mean, only 20 years in hindsight for us, it's all okay. But, the idea of policy and how these things spread, I say this popularly that the with tech policy you get to nudge the arc of history, because these technologies don't change things overnight. They change when we adapt to them, when the role changes. Computers invented 40-50 years ago. It's now when they become smaller, ubiquitous, and all of us have incorporated it into our lives. Internet 30 years ago, till the pandemic happened, we were not doing things remotely, right? So it's the policy around these things that actually causes the change on technology. And that's really the problem that started interesting me. How YIF helped, of course, was just sort of the happy collisions on the way to make this happen, because this is not a path that I would land at directly had it not been for all the happy accidents on the way.
Right, right. No, totally. Has it been the same for you, Jasmine? Was this the path that you wouldn't have taken had YF not been a happy collision in your journey?
I would say it would not have been, this fulfilling and at this scale if YF hadn't happened. So I obviously studied economics and I went to a college which is quite corporate in its outlook, and I always felt like a misfit. I sort of knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I came to the fellowship purely on the pursuit of knowledge. I was just fascinated by the courses that were being offered, and at that time the fellowship was really new. The first batch hadn't even graduated, so it's not like that we had a lot of data points and everything to make analysis and be very strategic about it. So I just came to the fellowship because I was like, it feels great. Like the faculty and the courses that being offered are just out of this world. It was even kind of surprising that how is it even possible to do this. So I just came in like as a curious person, just seeing where it goes, and I could have never imagined that it would be such a life altering experience, because I think what the fellowship helped me do was just sort of expand and sort of change how I think, like, because I had studied economics. So obviously I had studied about development in a very, very theoretical approach. But like when you study courses on anthropology by Amita Bavaskar and, Mekla and all of these people, you get these lectures by me, Shah, and, you realize that you cannot think about development in isolation. In terms of economic theories, you have to realize that there are people at stake. So even development comes at a cost. There would always be people who would benefit out of a development initiative or a policy change, but there will also be people who would sort of, be at the losing end of things. And as a development practitioner, as someone interested in working in this field, the choices that you have to make have to be focused where you mitigate the damage, where you find a way, obviously there's no perfect way, but like how do you sort of like ensure that the losing end is the least affected while maximizing the benefits. So just having that that multi perspective thinking to it is sort of is something that I don't think I would have had, which wouldn't have allowed me to do all the work that I've done in these years. Because I'll be very frank, even after the fellowship, I wasn't very clear about where I had to go, but like I sort of like, started sort of following that path. So my first job was actually with Pratham. I worked on their with their think tank unit. And so it was then, just as Tanuj mentioned, it was just like a series of happy coincidences. By chance, the thing that I worked on was something when I had to track the education policy of India over the last 60 years. And, I read every government policy and document, and I just got interested as to how these policies are developed. Like, what do people talk about when they're like coming up with these schemes and these, documents, etc. And that's what got me interested in to apply for the LAMP fellowship, where I worked with an MP, because parliamentarians are essentially the people who are coming up with the laws and policy. And when I did that, I realized that, okay, I think government is where I feel like you can make a lot of impact if you're able to, like, get into the right kind of organization, and sort of like fall into those places where you can sort of like put your foot in and um, contribute to things. And that's what took me to QCI. So yeah, and I mean I was quite fortunate that that was a time when QCI as an organization had come up and they were hiring, and I was able to like get in at the right time and sort of do all this work. But even now I feel like on a very day-to-day basis, I feel like my experience at the fellowship um sort of really helps me in my work. Like, for example, the first thing is obviously the network. Every time you're working on a new project or something, you would have 10 people who have like sort of either an academic specialization or they're like professionally working in that field. So you can just, and it doesn't matter if they're not from your batch, it could be like any batch, because the alumni network is so strong, and you could call up people, you could get help, etc. Even otherwise, like I feel like right now a big part of my job is managing teams. So I go back to the Kenman Smith classes on group dynamics and leadership, and I'm constantly drawing on my learnings there and trying to like apply them at work. So yeah, I don't think a lot of this would have been possible without the fellowship.
Tell us a little bit about your work at QCI. I remember talking to you and you said that it is, you now know the relationship between policy and governance while working in QCI. So what does QCI do, and what is your role like?
So I am part of a special division. So Quality Council of India is, has traditionally been the main quality organization of the Indian government. So they have a lot of boards who do different kinds of accreditations and certifications for hospitals, laboratories, professionals of all kinds. So when Mr. Adil Zainulbhai, who is our chairman, assumed office, he set up something called the chairman's office. Because he felt that he could he saw this potential of like getting, there are a lot of young people interested in policy and working with the government, and he set up that small office with like one or two people, and right now we are like over 500 people. Like, we've grown in 5 years. I was one of the few people who joined in pretty early. Like, I think I was the 40th or 42nd employee or something. And now we call the public, we call the PPID, which is your project implementation division. So what we do is that we work with different ministries. We do different kinds of projects. We do a lot of monitoring and implementation work. As Anna mentioned, monitoring is perhaps one of the most important aspects of public policy. One, also in terms of like seeing what progress are we making, but also in terms of conceptualizing the problem in the first go. So we do a lot of implementation projects for the government. Like, you must have heard of Swachh Swadekshan, all these kinds of, where we go on the field and we do surveys, etc. The other is more strategy or hybrid kind of projects, where we sort of offer a kind of consulting service to the different ministries, but it isn't just restricted to coming up with recommendations and everything. We're also part of the execution. I can't talk much in detail about, because a lot of this work is sensitive, but yes, we are working in different sectors. And over the last couple of years, I worked on projects which are focused more on the energy and the infrastructure sector. Without going into details, if I was to say something like, so for example, you have a certain process of, say, development of infrastructure, and there are different vendors executing these projects in the field. So how do you get these people, how do you sort of like bring transparency and accountability into the system, where you can sort of monitor and check their performance, and sort of like build incentives to sort of for these vendors to improve their performance, which would, in the larger scheme of things, improve the quality of infrastructure that is being developed in the country. So, so we work on developing these mechanisms which can be used for this execution.
Thank you. Anna, I would want to come to you and talk to you about your work. And Jasmine briefly mentioned about measuring outcomes of the various government schemes. And I guess JPAL is one of the foremost research organizations in the world, dare I say. And so tell us about your work and tell us about what JPAL does.
Firstly, we like when other people say it because then we don't have to say it ourselves, which puts us in a very comfortable position. No, I think in a nutshell, JPAL is a research and policy organization. Our core is that we, through our network of affiliates who are typically development economists in universities, we run randomized evaluations of sort of government policies or NGO programs to understand whether a program works or doesn't. And that is the sort of the simplistic definition of it. But essentially, randomized evaluations are the methodology to assess whether this program works or not. And it's what the founders sort of received the Nobel Prize in 2019 for. So just side note to look that up separately, because I won't go into the specifics of randomized evaluations. But what I do at JPAL is sort of work in the policy team, because while we realize that research is important and it's important to understand whether a program works and use the most rigorous methods that there are, these findings shouldn't exist only in the archives and in economics journals, but should be able to really inform the kind of work that's happening, whether it's through civil society or through the government system. And so that's what the policy team was within JPAL was set up to do. And how we work is we sort of work across different sectors, a lot of those, which are sort of cross-sectoral as well. But I lead the gender sector, which is a relatively new sector, because we realize that while gender is embedded in all kinds of development, unless we sort of really start to measure what is happening to women and start to dedicate space to articulating this problem from the gender perspective, let me not say women, but from the gender perspective, then we're also able to sort of start to frame solutions for that speak more clearly to these problems. So to give you an example, something that we're now very heavily focused on is improving the economic agency of women, and making sure that the kinds of interventions that exist right now, which are there are existing government schemes and programs, but they aren't necessarily working to improve women's labor force participation. Because in the last decade, I think or in the last 2 decades, our participation has dropped from 37% to now between 20 to 22%. I think after COVID, the numbers are still sort of, and that's strange, because on the one hand, those have been the years of economic development. So rightly, you should have had more women in the workforce. You should have had more women being able to reap the benefits of economic growth, but you didn't. And how do we sort of start to articulate this problem so that we start to understand what the solutions are? Because you do have employment guarantee schemes, you do have financial inclusion programs for women, but at the core of it, women are not really benefiting from it. So what really, so to really unpack that problem, JPAL would is sort of directing pools of funds to make sure that these kinds of interventions are, first of all, designed and evaluated, and we help by working with the government, so working with the NGO partners who are looking at solving a particular part of that problem, and then connecting them with the right kinds of research affiliates and through the networks that we have, to make sure that this evaluation is then sort of generating the right kind of insights, and make sure that it's feeding back into policy. And we have a very systematic approach to make sure we do that. Of course, at the end of the day, you could generate a whole load of insights, and it also depends on political will, it depends on the state machinery. And so part of our role is also to identify the right kinds of organizations, governments, institutions to work with, and to make sure that it's not just, our bottom line is not that we have disseminated evidence, but that evidence dissemination has led to some kind of improvement in a program or in a policy. So just to give a brief illustration, something that we were involved in was the evaluation of a gender sensitization curriculum, which, the face of it is quite simple. You think that a program that will expose adolescents to ungendered kinds of teaching materials would have an impact on them. And the evaluation, one can say, why do you even need an evaluation for that? But the truth is that without the backing of rigorous evidence, governments are not willing to even consider that this kind of a solution is something that we should put into place. So this is an evaluation that we were a part of. It was found to work in the short term, and at the end of 2 years, when researchers went back to talk to the participants of that 2-year program in Haryana, they found that the attitudes and behaviors are still, the shift is still significant. And this is really heartening, but it's shocking that this kind of an education is completely missing from our textbooks, from our teaching aids. And so we continue to repeat dated gendered stereotypes of mother in the home, father in the bank, girl as weak, boy as strong, things that should automatically cause us to be really uncomfortable, but we've just grown to sort of accept. And so now we're working with the government of Punjab, who has said, wow, we're impressed with this program. It worked in Haryana, it worked as a research, but what we want to do is scale it up. So, JPAL as the evaluating partner, sort of, joining hands with the government of Punjab and the NGO that designed the program, because for us, that's an important piece. They are the knowledge holders. They're the ones who, have the grassroots perspective, but what we are able to bring to the table is connecting the dots between the two. So, Punjab's the first state in the country to now have a curriculum that is gender sensitized for only for adolescents. So, part of the problem is currently being addressed, but there's so much more that we hope to be able to inform through our work.
That's so wonderful. I mean, and gender is such a huge problem in the country, and to be working in an organization that is spearheading this must feel truly wonderful. Tanuj, I would want to come to you. When we were discussing this panel, you briefly mentioned as to how iSpirit was at, at the forefront of various tech initiatives that the government of India has launched. I would just want to request you to elaborate a little bit about what iSpirit Foundation does and what is your role in the foundation.
So we're slightly different, and since the audience is some people who are interested in policy and how do you get in, how do you get into this field, we're slightly different from say a JPAL, like where Anna and a lot of other focused economic development economists and researchers work. We are a bunch of ex-technology folks, typically people who worked in your startups, your Googles, your Facebooks of the world. And what we do is, so first of all, no surprises, the world is moving more digital. Things are going online. Even before the pandemic, this was true. Now, what happens is the structure of how we go online, right? We don't think about it, but the structure of how we go online is very critical. Simple example, in India, you can pull out a app and you can pay to anybody, no matter what app they are using, right? And this has been the subject of, say, the new ICICI ad, and all of this is happening because of something called UPI at the bottom. Now, UPI is something that is been made by the RBI, the NPCI, and actually iSpirit as a not-for-profit think tank. We came up with the concept of UPI, and then we gave it pro bono to the RBI and NPCI to build. But what is it? It is payment rails, payment infrastructure for the whole country. And this is important because if, let's suppose tomorrow, and this already happens on our card networks, all our cards are Visa and MasterCard, right? Which is why the Indian government launched RuPay. Why is this important? Because let's say when Egypt, regime change happens, somebody sitting in the US today, Joe Biden, you might be very happy, but let's say another Trump comes in, right? And he's very unhappy within India, and he just tells Visa and MasterCard, switch off the payments in that country. This has happened to Russia, this has happened to Egypt, this has happened to Lebanon, this has happened in a bunch of places. So what happens is digital infrastructure is something that you want to build for yourself, not just because it's essential, security, payments for your economy, but also because it helps you decide the structure of your economy. It helps you decide who wins, who loses, whether you have one Google or one Facebook dominating the whole field, or you have multiple competitors. So at iSpirit, we basically think about the structure of the digital economy. And towards that end, we build things like UPI, we build things like new thing called account aggregator that's coming for financial inclusion. We built the national health stack, which is basically there's this new massive 400 million strong people insurance program, the PMABY. Uh, uh, the sort of backbone, digital backbone for that is something that we built. We helped come up with the CoWIN sort of app on the idea there, which is that vaccine gets, how does the vaccine gets distributed, the digital vaccine certification. So all of these pieces, these really nitty gritties of going digital, that at a country level, at a population scale level, what do you need? That's what we are making at iSpirit. Bunch of ex-tech folks, it's volunteer driven. So even if you're at your current job, you can come and start working with iSpirit and pick up a problem that seems interesting to you. And our output is therefore also not research papers or not necessarily studies, but sometimes our output is finished products, things that actually work. So we also have this public Wi-Fi access project that we're doing right now, because if you want people to go digital, you want to have them a way to access data cheaply. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff we do at iSpirit. Essentially, think of it this way: we're at the Wild West, we're at the first forefront of the digital world, and therefore, right now, somebody has to do the very basic work: making roads, making railways, making like large government offices. That's the kind of stuff that we're doing right now. And if you do this foundation work well, you can hope to have a lot better, a lot more diverse, a thriving digital economy rather than a big tech monopolized, controlled economy, right?
Right. Absolutely. That's so wonderful to hear. Um, I wanted to there was this underlying theme of, when Anna mentioned about political willingness to work, uh, and when Tanuj, you mentioned that the drones were banned. I wanted to just ask each of you as to how has your experience been with working with the government, because with somebody who is outside the public policy domain, sees the traditional view of looking at the government is that this is an opaque war and one doesn't really know uske piche what's happening. Is it willing to listen to people? Is it willing to listen to uh, evidences and putting them into policy formulation? So how has it been like working with the government for each of you? And I'll tie the next question with this question as to what do you think are the different roles wherein one can work with the government or in the field of public policy? What are those levers, or uh, what are those places or avenues wherein one can go in and create impact? Jasmine, I would want to begin with you.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I'll answer the second part of the question first, which is the opportunities that are available. I think because I have been a witness to it, in the last 6 to 7 years, the government has really opened up at all levels to getting in young people and people with domain and sector expertise, and organizations to work and collaborate with them. When I was in college, the only way you could work with the government was this summer internship in planning commission. That's it. That's about it. And now you have things like Quality Council of India, you have Invest India, you have so many of these things coming up, which are completely consultant, private consulting based units of the government where they have young people on contracts working. You will see that every ministry, you have Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog has its own, 5-floor office now full of young professionals and consultants. Ministries every now and then keep releasing these positions, for consultants, for interns, etc. So that then you have a lot of organizations that have cropped up, which are sort of working as a facilitator between the government at all levels, which is central, state, and at district level. You have things like Samagra, you have Clinton, you have Dalberg, you have Acumen, Omdia. So all of them, even JPAL, everyone is at an organization level working with the government. Even your Big Four and your MBB, which is McKinsey, Bain, BCG, now have special full-blown social sector practices which are working with the government as a client. So I feel like there is now like this whole plethora of opportunities where you can work with the government directly as a consultant or via these organizations. Then coming back to your own question, obviously we have this, I mean, even I used to have this very, very constrained opinion of the government, long back. But I think it is like any other, organization. You will have people who would be more willing to change, to adapt to newer ideas and technologies, and you will have some naysayers. It is all about, finding the balance and, finding those sweet spots where you can sort of make the change. If I was to give you an example, in 2013, Obama administration had one of its most public tech failures. They had this insurance exchange website which was linked to the Affordable Care Act called the healthcare.com. And the minute it was launched, the website crashed. It just completely crashed, and it was quite, a big disaster. And that's when they set up something called the US Digital Service in 18F, which were these two tech outfits made with Silicon Valley experts. And one of the biggest recommendation that this unit, this was headed by like big people from the tech firms, your experts and everything, was that it's three things. The private sector is seen as an outsider, right? And they're more willing to take risks and innovate. So you have to sort of funnel them into the system. And for this, you need to identify within the government who are your early adopters, who will collaborate and implement these reforms. Because as a private sector outsider, you have your constraints, right? You, at the end of the day, cannot sign a document, you cannot sign a file, you cannot execute it. But what you need to do is you need to find people who will be open and willing and will listen to you, also collaborate with you, because these bureaucrats have also been in the government for so long, and they know a lot of things which we outsiders would not know. Right. But you need to find those early adopters and work with them, and then sort of you can like move the needle. The second is obviously that the people who are who want to work in the sector, they need to like have a feeling of mission. They need to obviously have technical expertise and knowledge and everything, but what really drives you is that you have to realize that the public sector offers the best work, right? And you have to be passionate about it, and which is because working in the public sector is obviously slow, because the scale that you're working at and all of that, it's slow, it's redundant, you feel a lot of obstacles and everything. But then you have to keep at it. You have to have enough passion that you can see through all the hurdles. And the last thing which I personally find to be the most effective is communication. Like, to be very honest, like every time I go for a meeting with a joint secretary or a secretary, they would have a room full of files. They would have like 40 to 50 things on their to-do list and everything, and I can't expect them to like give me 2 hours to like run them through everything. So I have to find ways where I understand like how does this person communicate. I find ways that in those 30 seconds, 40 seconds, in those elevators, I can communicate it to the ideas to them in a way which is sort of like comprehensible, and which is something that they can absorb and react to. In the end, the most important thing about working in the development sector with the government is that you need to learn the art where you're working with them. Because a lot of times when we work, we make it like a us versus them thing. It
Hmm.
all comes down to this, this communication in a way that, listen, we're on the same side, we want the same things. And that's how you get to that place where you can like sort of build consensus in the room. You cannot walk into a room and full of government officials and have that air about yourself that, I know this better than you. You might, but you can't have that. You have to be humble, and you have to sort of like, use all those soft skills to make things work. And
Right.
I think, it's not impossible to find success. Like, I have found so many people in the government who are equally passionate about this work and who are willing to collaborate and change. So I think this is like one of those, great times to get into the sector, because I think it's really, really coming up.
Thank you, Jasmine. Tanuj, do you agree that this is a good time to get into the public policy space? And yeah, just tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, so it is a good time to get in the public policy space, primarily because one, the idea of outside help and expertise coming from multiple organizations, think tanks, specific experts, academics, is picking up, no doubt. Um, yes, working with the government is a skill in and of itself. It is it's if you're just starting, if you don't know how things work, it can be very frustrating. It can be, the speed of things will amaze you. It will amaze you not because it's moving very fast, but because nothing moves. And then one day somebody will pick up the phone on someone, and suddenly everything has happened, and you're like, why did it take you 5 months to do something that you clearly can do in a day? And if you do not have that patience, well, join the public policy thing. You will learn that patience is a very important skill to have in life, for your relationships, for otherwise also. So yeah, public policy is uncertain. You're not doing this for quick wins or quick rewards. You're not doing this because you can come in, join 6 months, and be like, I changed the world. If you're doing it for those reasons, don't. You're just going to make yourself and others very unhappy. But if you're willing, like Jasper says, you're driven by a mission. You want to see change, and you are more focused on that outcome of whatever it takes to get that change. And if whatever it takes means 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you're willing to stick it that long, then it makes sense. So the drones in India first got banned in 2014. It's 2021. I am still trying. Since that year, I have been trying to get things changed. Um, and this is, I would still say it's one of the quicker policy initiatives that we do. Sometimes, so there's this idea of an Overton window. If you're really interested in policy, go look it up. It's an Overton window. Is that there's a range of ideas that we discuss, and sometimes when this political window comes up and the time is right, you strike, right? So nobody sees the preparation. So UPI took off in the last 4 years. Nobody sees that we were trying to build it for 10 years, right? But when it does take off, it takes off in that overnight success manner. If you're willing to do all of that, it's a great place to do, because I'll add to what Jasmine said. Jasmine covered a lot of great points, but I'll add to this. Bureaucrats have their own compunctions. They have their own limitations. If you're a bureaucrat, even if you do a great job, you're not getting a promotion. You're not getting a raise. You're not making any money from it. But you do one thing wrong, you're getting fired or getting transferred. Think about what does that incentive structure does to a human. Why should they ever take a risk? Why
Right.
should they ever try something that is new? Right? So our working with the government is frustrating, but also because we are shooting ourselves in the own foot, right? We wouldn't create our own companies this way. But if you can, once you can absorb that, and it's internal to you, working with them is very sort of, it's understandable. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's at least you know where they're coming from. My own experience has been similar. Lots of progress, then suddenly plateaus for very long. And the only way you deal with it is to just keep at it, keep doing multiple things, keep doing multiple projects, and learn to take your wins from other places, and just sort of consistency and steadiness in the way you pursue a long-term mission. Yeah, yes, I guess that's it. I'll let Anna add what she thinks.
Thanks, Tanuj. And before Anna, you go, I just want to remind the attendees if they have any questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A tab. Do mention the name of the panelist to which your question is directed to. Anna, over to you on your experiences with working with the government and the various ways you think young professionals could come in and create impact.
Yeah, I think Jasmine really laid out the various avenues extremely well, and covered a lot of the organizations that young aspirants should be looking at as well. I would only add to that set, like to that universe of stakeholders, there's also this community of international and national donors, philanthropists, who are also in their own way committed to shifting the needle on specific development outcomes that they may be sort of interested in. And these could be former industrialists, they could be just foundations set up within the country or outside of the country. So that is also an avenue if that is the interest area that you have, because I think policy is very accommodating of various kinds of disciplines, academic compulsions, interest areas. And so that is one area that I would want to also highlight, because I think having the right people with the right outlook within these donor institutions really helps move the helps us as different organizations do what we do what we want to do meaningfully, because we have the right kind of donors asking the right kinds of questions, and you need good people in these institutions to be able to mobilize what is the most critical resource, which is money. So that is the one thing I will say about that universe, and then something to for the aspirants to look to. The other thing I will say about working with government, I think Tanuj has also added some great points to Jasmine's, but even at the end of 5 years, 10 years, of you doing what you want to do, at the end of the day, the real test of whether your sort of contribution mattered is the government taking full credit for what you have done, right? So I think that is something that every policy professional should know going in, because the real success is when the government is willing to take what you have proposed or the solutions that you have designed in collaboration with stakeholders as their own, and put their logos and signatures behind. So in a nutshell, there's really little reward, but it's a lot of personal satisfaction, and it's a lot of you saying, hey, remember that policy that came out, or remember how the drones were banned and then they were unbanned. Yeah, well, it didn't happen by magic. That's how a curriculum for adolescents to sensitize them on gender issues happened. But at the end of the day, when the government is willing to put their name behind your sort of a set of solutions, I think that's the real success.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks so much. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A tab, and the first one is for you. And although you've touched it briefly, RG is asking you what made you want to go into public health, and how did you tailor your YF experience to facilitate learning or gaining experience in this domain?
Sure, I'll quickly run through that. I think for me, public health was an automatic first step from sort of like learning about the larger development issues, knowing that I was interested in gender, and then realizing that if you had 50% of the population operating at not their full potential, simply because they are not able to access health services, they simply are not empowered enough to take their own iron folic acid pills, they are unaware of the various kinds of sort of provisions that exist for them. I think I realized that creating that pathway was really important. And so the subsequent jobs that I took up, which was with the United Nations and then with a policy consulting firm, I'm guilty of being one of them in my former life as well, really was in the area of health policy advocacy, and really taught me how to be able to bring something that has been a consistent issue. Maternal health has been, over the last 40, 50 years, a consistent issue for India, but has just not been big enough to solve, meaningfully. And so really like sort of that was something that struck me and was something that I wanted to be able to do something about. So I think that's how I ended up in public health. And it was I think Tanuj used the word, a series of happy coincidences that happened because of YIF.
Thanks, Anna. I see Tanuj is already typing the answer to the question directed to him. So I'll pick up the question which was directed to Jasmine. And Jasmine, this is a little contentious one. Probably it is. The question is that you said that the policy space uh, has changed in the last 6 to 7 years? Is it the government, especially the Modi government, which is open to outside influences in public policy, or is it that the feature is found in all governments nowadays?
Um, how I would say is, first of all, I would not use the word influencer. I think every government, if you look historically, has reached out to experts and people with those domain experts and expertise. If you look at the government before this government, which was your INC, they had the panel which was headed by Madam Sonia Gandhi, which had a lot of academics working on policy issues. But yes, there has been a change if you look throughout the world as well. I mean, in some countries like America and all, there were always these opportunities, because there all of these members of the Senate and the council do have their own offices. If you look, our MPs, our member of parliament, don't have any such provision. It is also the case in Australia. So most of these, democracies abroad do have a concept of young people working with at least the elected representatives. Yeah, I don't know if I would just solely credit to the government. Obviously, they have some credit due that they have, especially revamped organizations like Niti Aayog and open them up to more young individuals and professionals. But I think it's also got to do with a bit of a change in the times, because if you also see that the past 10 years is also when also we've had the whole advent of technology and social media and those sort of things. So there is, and also in terms of for young people like us, we have also started seriously considering this an option. I would say it's a mix of things. And if, as the Modi government, if I don't know whether they consciously made that decision, but I think if they did, it's great for all of us. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jasmine. There are a couple of open questions that I mean, but we're completely out of time, so I don't think we'll be able to.
Can I just answer that one question about the domain?
Yes, please.
Because this is something that's been very personal to me. When I started off working, my first job was in the education sector, in a very, very education focused organization. And then obviously LAMP was more generic. We worked on everything. But when I came to QCI, I somehow ended up on my first project in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. And I'll be very honest, on my first day, I wasn't even fully clear as to what is the difference between crude and gasoline and petrol and diesel. I had my, assumptions of it, but I wasn't fully sure what is Brent and all of that. Yeah, and then it just started that I ended up working in similar ministries and sectors like infrastructure and all. Even for myself, I never saw these sectors as development sectors, because I think we have this idea that okay, health development is only education and health and everything. But when you work on it, you realize that all of these sectors also play such a big role. If you are building better highways, the kind of changes that can come with that connectivity, like safety on highways helps people transit, it creates economic opportunities for people, then you have, your prices of commodities and all go down if you have better highways, if vehicles can go faster on them, if you have safer highways and roads for say, it improves people, it improves like the conditions for women because they can access, and like it's a safety element for them that gives them that freedom to sort of, say visit a hospital even per se. So I think even these sectors like energy and infrastructure, which are not traditionally seen as development sectors, do have a very very significant contribution. Like I did this project with Ministry of Power where we went and we did a survey on ground on how people benefited when they got electricity in their villages, and it's just mind blowing to see what kind of changes that can be. And I think even Tanuj would agree the same thing with technology. So I don't think you should like obviously if you have a domain interest, you should definitely pursue that. But if you see an interesting opportunity which is not in a conventional development domain, don't write it off.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess we'll have to wrap it up here. Yeah, my takeaways from the evening is that it's a very thankless field. At times, it tests your patience, which Tanuj said would be you would grow that patience that would help you in your relationships also. But it's a place which is very gratifying, and I could see that personal satisfaction when the three of you were talking about your work and the kind of impact that you feel that you're able to uh, you're able to make. So thank you so much for sharing and being with us today. Nikita, over to you to conclude the session.
So yeah, also would like to thank all of you for painting this comprehensive picture of your YF experience and a career in public policy. I believe it is helpful for people looking to make a career in the space, and it was insightful for me as well. So thank you for sharing those insights, and thank you for being proactive in answering the questions. Thank you, Pratyush, for moderating it so well. If there are any more questions, we can probably take it off this through the comments, and I believe people will be able to reach out to all of you for any personal and any help that they might want. So thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.